What's up, guys and gals? My name is Trolldad Gamer, and today I'm going to talk in some length about Destiny. Way! Mainly my opinions about what I think, who the major players will be, and maybe possible story for Destiny 2. But before I get started, it looks like on the horizon is a new DLC expansion coming later this year. It looks like it's going to drop in the fall, and it looks like it's going to be called Rise of Iron. So, more than likely, this will be previewed at E3 on June the 13th, which is my birthday, so it's a very good birthday present to me. Reportedly, there will be a new raid, more content than Year 1's first 2 DLC packs. So that is The Dark Below and House of Wolves. But they've also said in some threads that it might be smaller than The Taken King. So, read into that what you will, guys. Okay, so quickly moving on. Okay, so Destiny 2 is coming. So after the first game's intriguing mix of dense world building, but barely existent storytelling, it left most people slightly bemused, including myself. One of the biggest questions has to be, what the hell is number 2 going to be about? Well, let's have a look at the protagonists. You have Crota and Oryx. They are both dead. There's no explicit major threat, aside from the ever-present, ever-vague darkness. And with numerous threadbare narrative threads unravelling all over the place, where to go next? Take heart though. There's as much scope for reinvention as there is confusing foundation work to build on. In my opinion, Bungie hiring the Mass Effect writer Christopher Schlurf, this implies to me that the studio intends to take a pretty good crack at fixing the whole mess that is the story. I mean, let's look at this guy's credentials. He's written for Halo 4 and Mass Effect Andromeda. Okay, we can't really comment on Mass Andromeda as it's not out yet. But Halo 4 had a decent story. At least one thing you can say, it's certainly better than Destiny's story. It had a beginning, a middle and end. You know, things were going off. There was characters, protagonists, side players. It was all there. So, you know, give this guy a chance. Anyway, what was I saying? With a little bit of digging, I've found that there's a hell of a lot of good material for him to start with. In fact, after a good old look at the lore, some consultation with a few brilliant fan theory threads on Destiny Reddit forums, and I tied up a bit of it using my own several hundred hours of gameplay experience, I would like to think that I have a pretty good idea of where things are going. And if I'm right, everything that we think we know about Destiny could change dramatically. Okay, first off, the Traveller. Do you trust the Traveller? I don't. And here's why I do not trust the Traveller. What do we actually know about it? That great big ball bag in the sky. We've been told that with the gift of light, it once elevated Earth to a new golden age. We've been told that it was followed through the universe by the darkness, and after an epic battle, nearly killed. We've been told that with its last remaining effort, it created the ghosts, so that the Guardians could stand and fight eternal. But as for who or what the Traveller really is, and why and how it did any of this, we don't have a clue. To put a finer point on it, we don't know shit about who the Traveller is. An interesting little fact from the Grimoire reveals that during the last throes of the battle between the Darkness and the Traveller, as the Traveller was about to flee from the battle, Rasputin used its orbital cannon as it tried to flee the Darkness. This caused light to burst forth, and this caught the fleeing humans in orbit between light and dark, thus creating the Awoken. It's also interesting to point out that Rasputin hit the Traveller with its cannon. The reason why he did this was because he was so sure that as long as the Traveller was remaining on Earth, humanity wouldn't fall. It's also worth pointing that Rasputin does not trust the Traveller at all. It's just he felt it was a necessity to protect Earth. There's an interesting theory that I increasingly find myself subscribing to, is that the Traveller is a bit of an irresponsible jerk, really. Not strictly malicious, but definitely irresponsible. We know from various grimoire texts and a fair amount of explicit Destiny lore that the Traveller had been chased by the darkness, whatever the hell the darkness actually is, by the way, for countless years. Regardless of any good intentions, the Traveller legged it straight to our doorstep. But there's a more interesting factor to consider too, and that's what brings us onto Greek mythology. Mythological imagery is everywhere in Destiny. Hell, even the very idea of destiny itself is fundamental to Greek myth, where fate is such a powerful driving force that it's frequently personified. None of this can be a coincidence. In fact, a hell of a lot of Destiny starts to make a whole different kind of sense once you start relating it to the ancient world, and in particular, Greek lore. Which brings me round to the character Prometheus. See, Prometheus was the guy who stole fire from the gods and gifted it to humanity in order to raise them up past their current state of evolution. Sound familiar to the Traveller? No? Prometheus was eventually chased down and punished by the gods because, well, he had screwed up. Big time screwed up. Fire was not his to give. And in doing so, he had broken the natural order of things. In retribution, he was chained to a rock, but kept alive indefinitely, so that an eagle could eat his liver every single day. Now, does that not sound a bit like the Traveller's fate at the beginning of Destiny, where it is in state of near death, a shard of its body held on a hive altar on the moon, so that its light can be fed upon every day? So, my point being that the darkness might not necessarily be a force of malevolent evil, but simply something trying to reset the balance that the Traveller is thrown off. After all, from a man's point of view, Prometheus was a saviour, but to the gods, he was a thief, screwing with their authority and messing the preferred state of the world. In fact, if you analyse some of the lore relating to Destiny's alien species, there's a good argument that this scenario, whereby the Traveller arrives at a new world and ascends its civilization, did it do this as a gift? Or did it do it in order to raise an army? This has happened many times before. The act of benevolence, really one of self-preservation, performed in order to defend itself against the darkness. Which, all things considered, does this actually make the Traveller incredibly self-serving and more than a bit dangerous? I think yes, it does. And that's before you even consider the fact that it might well have created the Vex threat to Earth in the process. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because I reckon that things are going to get a lot more complicated in Destiny 2. Thus far, we've been told that the truth is simple. Light is good, darkness is bad, the Traveller is a friend, everything else is bloody awful. But in reality, there have been seeds of uncertainty scattered throughout Destiny's first couple of years. Now, consider Toland the Shattered, for instance. The long-lost, long-thought-dead Guardian. Toland was an enthusiastic student of the darkness. Eventually thought mad by his colleagues, but ultimately rather useful during the first abortive campaign against Crota. His obsession with hive rituals eventually led him to attempt to commune with Destiny's most hellish species on a friendly basis. In the end, this ultimately killed him, but he may well still survive in the hive's ascendant realm. A full copy of his journal is held by Eris in the tower. And another thing to consider is, he is also responsible for one of Destiny's big exotic weapons, Bad Juju, which is built around a darkness-infused frame. Can a knowledge of, or even a closeness with the darkness, be helpful and non-corrupting? It seems so. The awoken race were born of a distant run-in with it, while trying to escape during the collapse. This we know, I touched upon it earlier. They came out unscathed, and now openly reject the whole light and the dark argument. How will this affect Destiny 2? Well, I expect the true nature of the darkness will be revealed as a less malicious enemy than we've been led to believe. Maybe even expect Toland to return in some capacity as a major ally of what we used to consider the wrong side. Expect a whole pro-darkness movement to rise. In fact, expect the player base to be split over the issue. I'm going to predict this right now. I think Bungie will introduce a binary faction system, similar to World of Warcraft's Alliance and Horde, which will let us choose sides for differing content and rewards. For instance, 2 different versions of the same weapon, one light, one dark, different effects, different perks, difference in appearance. Or even imagine having 3 more supers depending on light and darkness alignment. I could go on, the list is endless. But how's all this going to kick off? How's it all going to come about? Well, let's see. Following the punishment of Prometheus, the gods then turned their attention to humanity, and then started royally screwing with us. They sent down Pandora, along with her box, which eventually filled the world with calamity when opened. That'll be Destiny's post-Golden Age collapse. Interesting point though. One of those release calamities was the goddess of strife, whose name was incidentally Eris. While not necessarily good or bad, she was rather the harbinger of dark, chaotic times, and instigated some serious goings-on later down the line. Now, following the events of the Taken King, we can be pretty sure that Eris will be quietly working with Marasov, the Queen of the Awoken. And between the Awoken's neutral alignment and Eris's years spent living among the Hive, it's certainly not a given that they're fighting for the light.
My queen, you were right. The Guardian was the key. For the first time, the whispers are silent. It is done. I have accepted my fate. I will not fail.
In fact, Eris's actions in the Taken King end cutscene, in which he claims a fragment of Big Bad Oryx's sword and accepts her fate, raise many questions about their plan. Were they just working to rid the solar system of Oryx's threat? Or did they also want him out the way, so that they could now claim his power and become figureheads of the darkness themselves? Let's not forget that Eris was coincidentally on Toland's fire team when he was lost. However it shakes down, I reckon it's probable that Eris will be the instigator of a great divide, leading to light and dark split. I was talking about this earlier. The mythological Eris's most significant action was to kick off the War of Troy. By seeding jealousy and dissent among 3 goddesses, she did this by offering the gift of an apple to the fairest, leading to grand rivalry over who deserved it more. Interestingly, the apple was known as the Apple of Discord, a name that may already sound familiar given that it's shared by a Yertle pulse rifle. Clearly, Bungie is aware of this myth. It is too much of a stretch to imagine that the ball of green light Eris carries might represent a certain fruit, maybe? And given that we're talking about the War of Troy here, having Eris operate as a sleeper agent inside the tower for so long would give us a great parallel to the Trojan horse. Maybe there's a good reason the Speaker doesn't trust her. The Speaker is set up as the earthly conduit of the traveller's will. He explains very little. He has absolute authority and is trusted blindly by Earth's greatest warriors, hence the Guardians. Yeah, that kind of setup has always worked out so well in the past, hasn't it? But is there any actual evidence that he is up to no good? Maybe yes. Notice that he's the only major Destiny NPC who continues to wear a mask in the tower at all times. That's a bit of an alarm bell right there, particularly when you consider that the use of masks was a fundamental element of Greek theatre, primarily used to allow actors to change personas very quickly. I'm not the only one questioning his motives. Consider the cult of Osiris, the Guardians who run the Trials multiplayer mode. They follow the teachings of the aforenamed exile warlock, and are on a mission to understand the true natures of light and darkness. It's very funny how anyone embracing both sides seems to get kicked out, isn't it? And they are not fans of the speaker, the cult of Osiris. In particular, Brother Vance, the cult's representative in the Reef. He has little but disparaging remarks to make. He asks, what would happen if it were revealed the speaker was a charlatan? He comments on how little use the speaker's comments are. He implies a falling out between Osiris and the speaker, back when the two were master and apprentice. The cult's law states an explicit desire on the speaker's part to forget the past. Out of sight, out of mind, they say. The speaker wishes this was true. In fact, if you read through all of Brother Vance's dialogue, you'll find multiple stacking references to the speaker as a liar. As a side note, there are also hints at some manner of plan, possibly involving Mara Sov, to bring Oryx to our solar system, which leads us back to Eris again. Whatever his place in the evolving story, it seems that the speaker may be actively trying to hide the true nature of the light and the darkness. Expect him to be the figurehead for the light faction when Destiny 2 finally rolls around, with Eris as his possible counterpart, because I am finding it increasingly unlikely that their retrospective, conflicting black and white dress styles can be just a coincidence. But they're not the only players in this. Now, everyone's favourite tentacle-faced bastard, the weekend exotic trader's enigmatic nature has led many to overlook him as a big story catalyst. But I suspect the time for such indifference is now over, because there's a major element of his identity we now need to consider. Now, Xur is identified as an agent of the Nine. We know almost nothing about who or what the Nine are, except that Mara Sov has communed with them in the past. But again, going back to Greek mythology, they're a pretty big deal. When the gods first sent down Pandora, they did so after organising themselves into the, you guessed it, the Council of the Nine. Among their number was a blacksmith. Now, blacksmiths make weapons. Xur sells weapons. And some of the equipment he has to hand, as we already know, is darkness infused. We've spent the last year or so pretty consistently excited or let down by the new toys that he brings us. But I suspect there's every chance that he's actually been seeding us with the tools for a new conflict all along. Just one final point then. Now, appearing repeatedly during Destiny's vanilla campaign was the mysterious Exo, her identity masked by one of the most maligned lines in a much maligned script.
We haven't got much time. Who are you?
Why have you been watching us?
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
Is clearly involved in whatever's going on behind the scenes. She appears at significant moments in the story, turning up at the end to gift us a pretty decent pulse rifle. But whatever her appearance and seeming benevolence, she isn't a guardian. She explicitly tells us that she wasn't forged in the light.
You're not a guardian.
No. I was not forged in light.
But despite her resolution to walk her own path, she does state that where it crosses with ours, ground could break. So whose side is she on then? Well, regardless of ambiguity, we know that she must have a side, albeit one that she's perhaps not dogmatically committed to. She explicitly calls out the Awoken for wavering between the light and the dark, telling our ghost that a side should always be taken, little light, even if it's the wrong side.
Ah, yes. The Awoken. Out there wavering between the light and the dark. A side should always be taken, little light. Even if it's the wrong side.
Could she possibly be Destiny's analogue for Pandora? That would certainly cover the not a product of the light angle, and the Exo's mechanical nature and mysterious origins would also be a nice fit for Pandora's manufactured existence. Has she rejected her purpose since the collapse, becoming the personification of rebellion against the very idea of destiny or fate? That would certainly fit, and give her a great significance given the incoming battle of ideologies that Hive spoke about. Whatever the future of Destiny 2, there are plenty of different story threads and characters to move it forward in an interesting way. Do you have a theory of your own? If so, then please share below in the comments. My name has been Troll.Gamer. Thank you for listening, and please like and subscribe. Thank you.